And that's one of the things which I do with the book, is I say, okay, now we look at this system and we've got all these people with vested interests and these conflicting interests, and this is all working there in society. Now, how do we bring all this together? And one of the things I have with libertarianism is that, I mean, a lot of people profess to be libertarians, but at the end of the day, if you're talking about getting rid of the government and getting rid of all of the programs of government and so forth and so on, there's a good chance you may be an anarchist. You just don't believe in government, which is fine. Hey, you want to be an anarchist, that's your political philosophy. But if you want to be a libertarian, libertarianism is essentially about, if you want to put it into equal terms, and I saw your little thing about the feminism thing and the equals feminism equals this and so forth, your other video. But if you want to look at libertarianism, to me, libertarianism equals constitutionalism.
Mm-hmm.
It's basically devising a constitution or a set of premises that are going to regulate and control the government. And libertarianism, to me, is about controlling government. And that's why the subtitle on the book is How to Control Government, before government controls you.
Mm-hmm.
Because essentially, that's always the challenge. And the founding fathers of the United States have, that was their biggest concern. I mean, if Jefferson came alive today and saw the current state of the United States, I think he'd be rolling over in his grave.
Oh yeah,
he wouldn't believe it, and he would be like almost traumatized by it. I went down to Monticello, just outside. I don't know if you've ever been there, just outside of Charlottesville, in Virginia, and because I've always been an admirer of Jefferson. I mean, he's one of the greats. Although he was a slave owner, and I know that. But I mean, he was a man of his time, right? I mean, we shouldn't be condemning people. It's just like political correctness, right? Political correctness is about, and a lot of feminist ideology that goes on today in social Marxism is about condemning current people for crimes of people of the past.
Yeah.
I mean, this is like that. What's the name of that show with Tom Cruise? There's one where they predict people's future crimes.
Oh yeah, Minority Report.
Minority Report. Yeah. This is the reverse Minority Report that we have. We're not going to convict you of the crimes you're going to do. We're going to convict you of the crimes that your grandparents did, that your great-grandparents did. And a lot of these people who are criticizing their own ancestors even, it's ridiculous.
Yeah.
I mean, I had seen a thing on the history of slavery. And apparently the Arabic countries under Islam had imported more slaves than the United States did at about the same time, and they had been initiated this far sooner, like hundreds of years sooner. But you say, well, why doesn't Saudi Arabia and all these countries have a large African population, descended from African slaves? Because they were brutal. They were eunuchs. They
castrated all of them.
So all.
The slaves couldn't pass down their descendants.
Yeah. So there were so millions and millions of Africans were killed by them, essentially, because they didn't even do these things under sterile conditions. Just take a rusty old knife and cut it off.
Yeah.
I mean, this is, totally barbaric, but we don't talk about that. We talk about the Western thing. And then we look at the whole situation with slavery, and you look at the British embargoes against slavery, and their efforts worldwide with the British Navy that finally brought an end to this thing. So yeah, Western people did this, but you know what? Slavery goes way back. I mean, it was always there. It only ended in the 1800s, the only time in human history it ever ended. So things are getting a little bit better. But we have this criticism that goes on. So you have any questions, Jerry?
I do have something to add, which is
Sure.
Francis Ngannou. He's probably the best heavyweight UFC fighter to ever emerge. And a few weeks ago, he won a very big fight. And at the end of the fight interview with Joe Rogan, he called out the Middle East. He's like, dude, with all the crazy shit that's going on now, they're taking African slaves again. He called it out on pay-per-view on national television. And I want to give him a big big shout out, man. That was so brave of him, you know.
Yeah,
Now all the
definitely.
Arab countries are like, we got to take out this big, massive UFC fighter. He's on their map now. He's on there, but he just like, fuck it. I got to stand up for my African brothers. And it's sad that like people are getting sold in Libya again for $400. It's like we fought a civil war in America to get rid of slavery, and slavery still exists in Libya and other countries in the Middle East in the 21st century.
Yeah, I mean, look at the big white slavery chains that they have going on. I mean, this is another big issue. I mean, you have a lot of, for example, Ukrainian girls and that are being captured and brought down there. At least there was a few years back, and this is long been an ongoing situation. My wife is from the Philippines, and I'm going to tell you something. Okay, she worked for an embassy in Manila when I met her. Okay, she was a professional person, and she was telling me, and she was working for an Arabic embassy. I won't tell you which one because I don't want to cause anybody embarrassment.
Exactly.
But but she told me that people would call her on the phone, begging and crying, "Can you help me? Can you help me get out of here?" Because they take your passport, right? Even if you go there as a maid or in any kind of service, they take your passport, and the governments in the Philippines wouldn't do anything for them. And the embassies, they were in their desperation, they'd call this embassy that she was working at in Manila and say, do you know some way that you can help my family, or can you find this person? They've disappeared. I mean, a lot of them get killed. I mean, she told me horrible stories about women who are like raped or just passed around to all the friends of this guy who they're supposed to be a maid in this particular wealthy person's home or what have you. So these are true stories and things that go on. I mean, it's not only chopping off people's right hand for stealing or head choppings and all the rest of it. I mean, if you really look at ISIS, that's pure Islam. That's pure Islam, man. Like they just took the Quran and literally applied it. So as much as we say that they're barbaric, we have to realize that along with this thing, we've had a lot of things go on here in Canada where they're trying to bring in, for example, Sharia law. So what are you going to have now? You're going to have two laws? You're going to have one for white people, another one for everyone who's Islamic. And if you join this faith, well, which law are you going to be under? So do we have a country anymore? Like there's something very, very suspicious about all of this, because I can't believe that these elites, who for the most part have had some kind of university and higher education, perhaps some kind of intellectual education, that they don't realize what they're dealing with here. I mean, I've worked with some great people from Islamic countries over the years and never had an issue with them. And a matter of fact, in recent years, about a decade ago, I was also, let's say I was with a housing company that was taking care of properties, and I was doing work in their homes, individual homes for people. I got along with them great. I had one guy actually trying to convert me to Islam because he gave me a copy of the Quran, and he started telling me all this stuff. Well, when you pray, you got to wash yourself and this and that, which, that's fine. But I mean, I'm quite secular, so I'm not, I believe in a higher, I wouldn't say higher being, a higher consciousness. My concept of God is quite unusual, but to be converted to something religious, and also because the French Canadian thing. I mean, in the 1960s, I mean, they had religious rule in Quebec, and there was a lot of awful things that went on. I had a friend of mine. This is another little story, and it's kind of where the gist of the book goes too. I had a friend of mine who was a Jewish guy, and I was working for him, kind of a friend employer sort of situation. We got along very well, and his family was extremely wealthy. They were in the needle industry, clothing manufacturing back in the 60s and that, when it was a big industry. So it was from a very moneyed family. Okay. And he told me that his father-in-law was having problems with them forming a union. So his father-in-law, instead of dealing with the people themselves, went to the parish priest, had a talk with him, gave him some money, and technically there was a strike that would have been announced for that week, and they had been on strike for like a couple of days. And by the time Monday rolled around, everyone was back to work and the union was dissolved. And he said to me, he says, I don't know what that priest said, but after that, all their union problems were over. So, that's the kind of thing. I mean, it's like a guy once said to me, what is a priest? A priest is a middleman between me and my God.
Mm. Yeah.
You know? And essentially, when you got this guy in the middle, you don't know what he's going to do, because he often has his own agenda. He's not necessarily an honest broker. Could be a totally corrupt guy. He's just there, monkey in the middle, but he's going to screw you over, and you're not going to realize by the time your message gets relayed from, amongst the three guys, by the time it gets to the last guy, you got a totally different situation, because he's put his own agenda in there.
Yeah, of course.
And this is one of the big problems with what I've tried to write about in the book. Is I've tried to, I don't want to, everybody whines about everything.
Mm-hmm.
But the thing is, how many people actually want to come up with solutions? I've always believed, if you're going to complain about it, you have a responsibility to come up with some better solution.
Yeah, agreed.